I want to test this further. So then he said, let's see if we can let's see if we can categorize these problems another way. Let's see if we can figure out if it's a personal versus impersonal thing. So they started scanning people again. This time they asked them, okay, if you were driving down the road and you saw a little girl by the side of the road by herself crying and she looked like she was bleeding from the leg, and you pulled over to see her and you saw that she was injured and she needed medical attention, but she was bleeding rather profusely, so obviously she had to get to the hospital. But if you put her in your car, you'll probably incur a $200 upholstery cleaning bill, okay? Should you take the girl to the hospital? And of course, 90% of the people say, yes, you should. So then he says, okay, well, how about this then? If you arrive home from work and you find you've received an Oxfam letter, a request from Oxfam, that says if you donate $50, then we can save 5 children in an African country. They need medicine, they need clean water, and your donation of $50 will get it to them and increase their chance of surviving, extremely high. Most of us admit, well, I'd probably put it down and forget about it. The interesting thing is, in the case of the girl, we didn't say that it was a life-threatening injury. Admittedly, it was a bad injury, but we didn't say it was life-threatening, whereas in the case of the Oxfam request, the money you have to fork out is less, the lives you'll probably save is certainly more, yet people admit, well, I probably wouldn't have bothered. And again, the same thing happened. They noticed that when people were saying, yeah, I would definitely pick up the girl and bring her to the hospital, under the fMRI scan, they saw all this activity down in the limbic system, which again is the emotional component of the brain. But whereas it came to the Oxfam letter, no, it was a cost-benefit analysis thing. No, you know what, next time. But no emotional reaction. Okay, so now, Josh Green is pretty convinced, okay, this is definitely where it's at. But he's also aware, he's a psychologist, I'm not, so I'm just sort of going on his work, but he's also aware that there's another part of the brain that we should be able to see light up, and they call it the ACC, the anterior cingulate cortex, which they call the OOPS area of the brain, which is the part of the brain that is known to show activity when you have some sort of internal conflict. Okay, so if there's something you're mulling over and you don't know what to do, this ACC is known to light up. So he purposely, I won't go through all the details on this one, but he purposely put people in situations where, okay, I know they're going to react emotionally, and as well, they're also going to probably have some sort of a rational cost-benefit analysis challenge, and as he expected, yes, the ACC lights up, okay? So morality, or at least the deliberation that goes through a person's head, has pretty much been mapped out. Not in great detail yet, but they've pretty much made the case that this is all in our heads here, and we can actually point to where it's happening and when it's happening. Not only that, but we can also sort of foresee, we can expect to see how people will make their moral judgments based on whether or not it's a personal matter. If it's a girl by the side of the road, it's close proximity, I see her, I can't help but feel emotional, I'm going to react a certain way. If it's 4 starving children in Africa, I've never seen them before, I may never even have met a starving child in Africa, I don't bother with it. Not literally, but that's the general, of course, response that people tend to give. So I think that laid the groundwork to say that morality is a mental factor, is a mental system. Other people then thought, well, this is pretty compelling. Let's see if we can test this in other ways. So some people, for example, there's a group in Italy, they said, well, if what you're saying is true, if certain types of moral dilemmas cause us to rely on our emotional judgment, then we should be able to take psychopaths, okay, who have significantly reduced capacity for empathy, and we know that, it's heritable, and put them in the same situations, and we should see, well, we're not sure what we're going to see, but obviously it should be that since they don't have the capacity for the emotional response, we should see that they'll have to appeal to something else to make the decisions, and that's exactly what happened. They put psychopaths under the fMRI. They say, okay, do you push the man to his death? And they say, yeah. And no emotional response. But the reason part of the brain lights right up. So they're doing cost-benefit analysis because they don't have the capacity for the emotional, the empathy, and the compassion. A group in Iowa said, well, okay, you've proven that. Let's try it the other way around. Let's take people who have dementia of the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, people who don't have the ability to reason and do cost-benefit analysis. Put them in the fMRI machine. Would you push the man to his death? Not a chance. Okay, well, would you throw the switch? Not a chance. because they don't have the capacity to say, as much as I would hate to see that one lone hiker die on the alternate track, I realize that to save 5 ultimately is a better decision. They don't have that capacity. All they have is an emotional reaction. Can't get those people to say, yeah, I'll do it. So now I think when you start linking specific mental disorders with an incapacity to make a moral judgment the way that most people do, I think you're presenting a pretty hard case for a mental source for morality, and a multifaceted one as well. So that's all great. Then another guy at Harvard, Harvard is the hotbed right now for moral theory, Jonathan Haidt. He takes this data and he says, well, hold on a second. I'm not doubting your conclusions here, because I can see the screen, I can see exactly that, yes, you give them this dilemma, emotions light up, you give them that dilemma, they start to reason. But if 90% of the people answer the same way, then why is there so much moral disagreement? Doesn't make sense, right? Because no one disagrees that there isn't lots of disagreement, right? So he starts pondering this, and he says, okay, well, we're going to have to take it back to basics again. Let's start surveying people. So he puts an online survey out. 23,000 people respond to his survey. And on this survey, he's asking people, okay, do you think X is a moral matter? You know, so if someone performs action X, is that morally acceptable or neutral? You know, and Y and Z, and how many of these things do you think are moral matters? And then they also asked subsequent questions. Where were you born? What religion do you practice? Do you have any moral theory education? Do you have any education at all? So they wanted to gather as much data they could just about these individuals, as well as their opinions about morality. After, I'm sure, a lot of frustrated students of theirs going through the data, they came up with some interesting conclusions. Turns out there are 5 what they call moral domains, okay? 2 which were universal. So across all 23,000 people that were surveyed, just about every single person said harm and fairness. Those things are moral. So if you treat someone unfairly or if you harm them, that's a moral matter. Doesn't matter who they were, doesn't matter where they came from, what language they spoke, that was the opinion. That was interesting. But then they found there were 3 other moral domains that only 50% of us feel are moral domains. Respect for authority, in-group loyalty, and personal purity. So half the people said, yes, personal purity, that's a moral matter. You can't just go around, you know, acting sexually promiscuous. That's a moral matter. And then the other half said, no, keep your laws off my body, okay? So what does this, okay, so what do we do with this data? What does that tell us? Well, it wasn't enough. Okay, let's see if we can find some more correlations. So then they went through the data again. And they said, okay, well, hold on a second. The ones that think that personal purity, respect for authority, and in-group loyalty, they're also the ones that identified themselves with social conservatism. They're the right-wing people. And the ones that say, no way, mind your own business, this is my body, or this is, you know, I'm not part of your group and I'm going to do what I want, they're the ones that tend to identify themselves as social liberals. So without getting into the details, Haidt came up with a great theory. He thought, well, this makes sense. You know, Socrates 2,500 years ago said that moral disagreements will always exist. Now, he was speculating, I think. I don't think he had the data. But now Jonathan Haidt comes up with this data and says, you know what? If you think about it, if we let the social liberals run free, then the world will be an anarchy. But so we need social conservatives to keep things in check. On the other hand, if the social conservatives at the extreme end had their way, the world would be one theocracy, which of course nobody wants either. So in fact, because there are fundamental moral disagreements based on the fact that we don't all have the same moral values, we're just wired up that way, there's actually a balance that results, there's a social cohesion that results from this. Which actually, I haven't really gotten to. Social cohesion, by the way, is the whole point, is the whole reason we're moral beings, by the way. I don't have enough time to get into it very deeply, but basically the bottom line is, social animals are social because when we cooperate, we all benefit, okay? So the better we are at being social, or in other words, the more moral we are, the more other-regarding we are, the more each of us benefits, and the greater our group is, our reproductive fitness increases basically for every member of the group.